"No one wants a fat girl, sir, but I can tend the baby," the widower said. "Then stay." The sun hung low over the desert planet of Dusthaven, turning the sand dunes into a sea of gold and bronze. The wind blew harshly, carrying tiny grains of sand that scuffed across the metal panels of the small settlement. In the distance, a lone figure trudged slowly toward the town, carrying a bundle wrapped in a faded blanket. Her name was Mara, and she did not care about how the townspeople might see her. She was heavyset, with broad shoulders and strong arms, and her boots made deep impressions in the dry sand. But what mattered most was the little life in her arms, a baby, wide-eyed and curious, who had cried little on the journey, trusting her completely. Mara's arrival did not go unnoticed. From the balcony of a dusty saloon, a group of locals whispered and nudged each other, their eyes narrowing as they looked at her. "Who would bring a baby here?" one of them muttered. "And she's, well, you know," said another, unable to finish the sentence politely. Mara ignored them. She had heard these words all her life, and they did not bother her. She had a purpose, and that purpose kept her moving forward. The baby cooed softly, sensing her calmness, and she smiled down at it. As she stepped into the main street, the sound of hover wagons rumbled in the distance. Dusthaven was small, a collection of metal shacks and low-roofed houses built to withstand solar storms and sand drifts. At the edge of town, a man worked quietly in the shade of a lean-to. He was tall and rugged, his hands covered in grease and dust. His hair was streaked with silver, though he was not old, and his eyes were sharp and careful. This was Silas, the widower of the town. Since his wife's passing, he had thrown himself into caring for the children and maintaining his small ranch, never letting anyone get too close. Mara stopped a few feet away, keeping the baby snug against her chest. Silas looked up, his eyes meeting hers. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough for someone to feel judged and studied. "I can help," Mara said simply. Her voice was steady, but it carried a quiet confidence. "I can tend the baby. I know how to care for young ones." Silas studied her, his face unreadable. He had seen many strangers come and go in Dusthaven. Few lasted. But there was something different about Mara. She didn't flinch at the harsh sun. She carried herself with strength, not arrogance, and most importantly, she had a baby's needs in mind before her own comfort. "Then stay," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. The word surprised even him. The locals in the street gasped softly, exchanging whispers and wide-eyed glances. Mara nodded, setting her burden down gently on a soft mat outside a small, sun-warmed building. "Thank you," she said. She looked up at Silas and smiled. "I won't let you down." The day moved slowly after that. Mara explored the small settlement, learning its rhythm. She helped a woman at the market arrange her produce, showing patience and care as the baby cooed softly in her arms. She fixed a leaking water pump for a farmer, using tools she carried in a worn leather satchel. People began to watch her more closely, curiosity replacing judgment. Silas kept to his work, but he could not ignore the way Mara moved. There was a practicality to her, a grounded energy that he had not seen in a long time. As he tended to his robotic livestock, metallic creatures designed to survive the harsh desert climate, he noticed Mara watching closely, studying the machines with keen eyes. "That's the youngest of my herd," he said, nodding toward a small robotic calf. Its eyes glowed faintly in the sun, and it nudged Silas's hand expectantly. "It needs feeding, or it won't last through the day." Mara stepped closer, her expression serious. "I can help. Show me." Silas hesitated. Trust did not come easily to him. Yet the determination in her eyes, the way she held the baby with gentle confidence, told him she was capable. "Fine," he said. "Follow my lead." For hours they worked side by side. Mara fed the robotic calves, repaired small damages in the metal frames, and even improvised a small mechanism to improve their mobility. Silas found himself silently impressed. She was clever and careful, but more than that, she was patient, willing to learn, and quick to adapt. As the sun began to set, Dusthaven took on a warm glow. Mara sat outside, cradling the baby as it drifted off to sleep. Silas stood nearby, watching the horizon, feeling a sense of ease he hadn't known in years. For a moment, it was as if the harsh desert did not exist, as if the town could breathe just a little easier. Then came the whispering. The locals, unsure of how to react, murmured among themselves about Mara's presence. Some were curious, some skeptical, and some openly disapproving. One woman standing near the market stall muttered, "No one wants a fat girl in Dusthaven. Why would Silas—" But Silas ignored her. He had spent too many years alone to care about petty judgments. He knew what he saw: a capable woman, someone who could help, and someone who cared. That was enough. Night fell, and the twin moons of the desert planet rose high in the sky, bathing Dusthaven in silver light. Mara laid the baby in a soft cot inside the building she had been given. It cooed and stretched, settling into its new surroundings with surprising ease. Mara watched it for a moment, then looked out the window at Silas, who was walking back toward the ranch. She felt a spark of hope. Maybe in this harsh world, there was a place where she could belong. A place where she and the baby could live without fear or judgment. Silas returned to the house, brushing off sand from his sleeves. He looked at Mara, who smiled warmly. "Ready for another day tomorrow?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, and I think Dusthaven will survive better with you here." There was a quiet satisfaction in that. Mara was not here for praise, but for survival, for a chance to make a life for herself and the child. And Silas, for the first time since his wife's passing, felt a small sense of companionship, a feeling he had not allowed himself in a long while. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of desert blooms that had survived the harsh sun. Crickets and small robotic drones chirped quietly in the distance. Mara sat outside a little longer, feeling the wind on her face, the baby resting peacefully in her arms. The stars above sparkled brightly, distant and untouchable, yet somehow close enough to feel like a promise. Tomorrow they would work together again. Tomorrow Mara would prove herself further. And tomorrow maybe the town would start to see her not as the outsider or the fat girl, but as someone who mattered, someone who could bring light into a place that had long been lonely. For now, though, she sat quietly, the baby safe in her embrace, and the quiet hum of Dusthaven surrounding them. In a town that had been wary of outsiders, Mara had already begun to carve a place for herself. And Silas, the widower who thought he could do everything alone, realized that maybe help and friendship could arrive in the most unexpected forms. The desert was harsh, the settlement small, and life was never easy. But Mara had arrived, and with her, something new had begun. Something that neither she nor Silas could yet name, but both would come to cherish: hope. The next morning, Dusthaven awoke under a sky streaked with pink and gold. The twin suns rose slowly over the dunes, warming the settlement and glinting off the metal panels of the buildings. Mara stirred early, rocking the baby gently in her arms. The small cot was quiet now, and the child's breathing was soft and even. She smiled, brushing her fingers through its soft hair. Outside, the town was already stirring. Merchants opened stalls, the hum of hover wagons filled the air, and children ran barefoot over the warm sand, their laughter ringing out in sharp contrast to the wind-whipped quiet of the night before. Mara adjusted her satchel and stepped outside, feeling the energy of a new day. Dusthaven was harsh, but it was also alive, and she wanted to become a part of it. She spotted Silas tending to the robotic livestock at the edge of his small ranch. The metal creatures were grazing quietly on a sparse patch of synthetic grass, their eyes blinking softly as they monitored each other. Silas waved at her, and she nodded in return. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough but calmer than yesterday. "Ready to start the day?" "Always," Mara replied. She glanced at the baby, who cooed and kicked gently. "And I think we might have a problem." Silas raised an eyebrow. "Problem?" "Yes," Mara said, stepping closer. "Last night, as I was helping tidy the water pump near the South Ridge, I noticed some strange energy readings. The instruments we use to monitor the wind turbines were acting up. I think something is interfering." Silas frowned. "Interfering how?" "Electrical surges," she explained. "Strange pulses I haven't seen before. It's subtle, but it's there. And I think it's coming from the dunes outside town." Silas looked toward the endless sands stretching into the horizon. "The dunes are empty," he said. "Nothing out there but sand and rocks." "You sure it's not just a glitch?" "I double-checked," Mara said firmly. "It's not a glitch. Something is out there, Silas. I can feel it." He studied her for a long moment. Mara's confidence, her careful observation, and her calm determination reminded him of himself, except that she had a kind of curiosity he rarely allowed in others. "Then we'll check it out," he said finally. They spent the morning preparing. Mara packed tools, energy scanners, and supplies into a small hover wagon, making sure the baby had enough food and blankets for the day. Silas loaded the mechanical animals with repair equipment and secured the robotic herd for the journey. Together they moved quietly, their steps and machines kicking up soft clouds of sand. As they reached the dunes, the wind picked up, shifting in gusts that made the sand swirl like tiny whirlwinds. Mara held the baby closer, wrapping it in a soft cloth to shield it from the sand. The energy readings grew stronger as they climbed higher, subtle vibrations humming under their boots and the hover wagon's treads. "There?" Mara said, pointing to a small depression in the sand. The readings spiked slightly as they approached. She knelt, adjusting her scanner. "It's definitely coming from here, but it's not a machine." "Not exactly." Silas looked around, scanning the dunes with a careful eye. "Not a machine? What do you mean?" "I mean, intelligent," Mara said softly, almost to herself. "Something alive, or at least something that thinks." Silas's jaw tightened. Dusthaven had been a safe, predictable place for a long time. Strange things outside the dunes were rare, and intelligent life beyond the colony was considered mostly legend. Yet Mara's conviction was difficult to ignore. "Okay," he said, taking a deep breath. "We'll investigate, carefully." They moved slowly into the depression. The sand shifted oddly underfoot, as if something beneath it was moving. Mara knelt and gently tapped her scanner. Lights flickered and hummed softly. She frowned. "It's not dangerous? At least not yet. But it's definitely watching us." Silas glanced around. "Watching us?" Mara nodded. "I think so. And I think it might be curious. I don't feel anger or hostility, just curiosity." A soft glow appeared beneath the sand, faint at first, then growing steadily brighter. Mara's eyes widened in fascination. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, almost as if the sand itself were alive. "Stay back a little," Silas cautioned. "We don't know what it can do." Mara obeyed, but her hands hovered over her tools, ready to record or study the phenomenon. The glow formed into a pattern, rising slowly like a small dome. Inside, tiny motes of light floated, twisting and turning. Mara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a calm unlike any she had felt in years. Silas frowned. "What is it?" "I don't know," Mara said, voice quiet, "but it feels friendly, curious. I think it wants us to notice it." They observed the glowing dome for some time, careful not to disturb it. Mara adjusted her instruments, noting every pulse and every movement. Silas remained close, protective but increasingly fascinated. It was rare to see her this captivated, and even rarer for him to see anything beyond his work stir such a reaction in someone else. After a while, Mara stood and brushed sand from her knees. "We need to report this to the town," she said. "Not to worry them, but to prepare. This could affect the wind turbines and water pumps if it grows stronger." Silas nodded. "We'll keep it quiet for now." "Just us, Mara. No need to scare people with whatever this is." The return to Dusthaven was quiet. Mara kept the baby nestled in her arms, humming softly as the little one's eyes fluttered closed. Silas followed closely, thoughtful and quiet, the weight of the unknown pressing gently on him. Back in town, life went on. The markets buzzed, children played, and the townsfolk whispered as Mara passed. Some had begun to soften toward her, noticing her strength, patience, and skill. Others still watched her with suspicion, unsure of her intentions. But Mara moved with quiet confidence, knowing that actions mattered more than words. Silas invited her to help in his workshop later that day. They worked side by side, repairing hover wagons and adjusting robotic livestock sensors. Mara's knowledge of mechanics was impressive, and Silas found himself relying on her more than he had expected. They spoke little, but the comfort of shared work built a quiet understanding between them. As evening fell, a sudden shift in the wind stirred the desert sands. Mara paused, listening. Her instruments were silent now, but her instincts tingled. "It's close," she said softly. "The dome, it's near." Silas looked at her, concern shadowing his features. "Do you want to check it again?" Mara hesitated. She thought of the baby, of Dusthaven, of the delicate balance they were beginning to maintain. But her curiosity, her sense of responsibility, and her drive to protect her new home won over. "Yes." Carefully. They returned to the dunes after sunset, moving under the soft light of the twin moons. The glow had grown, now visible even from a small distance. Mara approached, scanning the area. The dome pulsed gently, responding to her presence as if acknowledging her curiosity. Silas watched her with quiet admiration. She was brave, patient, and careful, not reckless. He realized that her presence was more than helpful. It was grounding. Dusthaven had been predictable and lonely, but Mara brought a spark of life that even he had not expected. As they observed the dome, Mara spoke softly. It's like it wants to communicate, or at least share something. Maybe it's lonely, or maybe it just wants to be noticed. Either way, it's harmless. Silas nodded, though he remained alert. We'll figure it out. Together. The dome slowly faded as the night deepened, leaving a trail of glowing motes that drifted into the sand. Mara and Silas returned to town, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. No one in Dusthaven knew yet what they had seen, and for now, that was enough. By the time they reached the settlement, the sky was a deep violet, the stars shimmering like tiny lanterns over the desert. Mara laid the baby down in the small cot again, watching it breathe softly. She felt a quiet thrill, a sense of purpose and belonging. She was no longer just an outsider. Dusthaven was beginning to feel like home. Silas stood nearby, looking out over the rooftops. He realized something important. He did not need to face life alone anymore. Mara had arrived not just as a helper, but as a companion in a harsh world, someone who understood the importance of patience, courage, and care. And outside, in the dunes, the glowing dome waited. Curious, gentle, and alive, it seemed to recognize Mara and Silas, as if acknowledging the start of a partnership that might change the desert forever.